John Bush is the Education Director of the Foundation for a Free Society. He is also the Chief Policy Guy for media and media mogul for Texans for accountable government. His main focus is privacy, the impact of the Department of Homeland Security's fusion centers. If you don't know what one of these fusion centers are, I didn't before I met John Bush. You're going to find out. Ladies and gentlemen, John Bush.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Not that I just want the center stage. Mike Rogers was very influential locally in funding this event, but the Foundation for a Free Society, they funded our entire national tour. So these guys are extremely important to us as well. Whatever city we go to, they basically paid some of the base expenses for us to be able to get there, which enables us to put this event on. And John is a great representative of that organization. I hope you'll listen to what he has to say here and visit him at his table, which is somewhere. But please welcome my good friend, John Bush.
Hello, John.
Thank you. My name is John Bush. I'm the Education Director of the Foundation for a Free Society. I traveled all the way to the Live Free or Die state from Austin, Texas, which I call home. The great sovereign Republic of Texas. You can say that. I heard someone give Rick Perry some praise earlier. I just wanted to be known, because the guy might run for president, that he's not deserving of any praise from this crowd. Yeah. He claims to stand for the 10th Amendment. He claims to stand against federal intrusion. But he's got the Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the Department of Justice, right up and influencing local law enforcement and training them to believe that people like you in this room are potential domestic terrorists. So, not to mention that, the Trans-Texas Corridor, the NAFTA Superhighway, North American Union, the guy visits internationalist conferences like the Bilderberg Group. So, in New Hampshire, if you're going to vote in the Republican primary and he's in it, please don't vote for my great governor, Rick Perry, the 10th Amendment guy. Yeah, forced vaccinations as well. I tried to push a Gardasil vaccine on all the young ladies of Austin. It was executive order, too, trying to circumvent the legislature. Not to say that it'd be okay if they legislatively declared it. I'm the Education Director, as I said before, for Foundation for a Free Society. The Foundation for a Free Society is a non-profit. It's a 501c3. Our mission is to educate, activate, and liberate. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you guys about today, applied to decentralization, federalism, and the 10th Amendment. We want to educate people about the philosophy of liberty. We want to activate them to take action to spread the philosophy of liberty amongst their community and amongst their representatives at the local level. And finally, what I think sets us apart from other libertarian think tanks and nonprofits is that we want individuals to liberate themselves, to simply choose freedom. We want to encourage people and remind them that you need not ask permission in order to live as free, sovereign individuals. In many instances, you can just make that leap and actually live free, even if it might be illegal, because of course something that's in contradiction to natural law, to God's law, is no law at all.
That's
so
right.
That's part of the message. So I'm going to split my talk up into 3 parts: educate, activate, and liberate, and impart advice, principles, and some information concerning those different topics and the idea of decentralization. So I'm a big fan of the 10th Amendment. I'm a big fan of the 9th Amendment. I'm a big fan of state sovereignty, a fan of states' rights. But I want to remind people that it's not necessarily about states' rights. I don't believe states or governments can even have rights. It's all about individual rights.
That's right.
Those rights.
Even better.
I'm going to teach you guys, some of you might have heard about this. It's called the principle of subsidiarity. And this actually arose from the Catholic Church, the principle of subsidiarity, which states that a central authority should have a subsidiary function, performing only those tasks which cannot be performed at a more local level. So that's the principle of subsidiarity. That's decentralization. It's what the essence of the 10th Amendment is. Now recall, it's not just about a relationship between the federal government and the state's governments. It's all about, to me, concentric circles that radiate outward. That's where authority should lie. That's where the rights are vested. It starts with the individual. The individual who's a sovereign entity who owns himself. From there, the next circle is your family, your immediate family, your extended family, people that you share blood with, people that you grew with, your parents, your sisters, your siblings, cousins. And from there, it's your community, the next circle: individual, family, community, your peer groups, your co-workers. This is where authority should lie. This is where decisions should be made that affect your life at this particular level. Next we have the township, or the city, or the county even. And then from there we have the state governments, again, which were instituted to protect our individual liberty, to protect our right to life, liberty, and property. From there you have the national government, which these states, which were instituted to protect individual liberty, they gave up some of their powers in order to establish a national government. And now, unfortunately, we're on the road towards international governance, towards global governance through the United Nations, IMF, WTO, Agenda 21. And see, the problem is, whenever authority is vested in a level like the international or even the national level in many instances, most instances if you ask me, it makes it a lot more difficult for the individual to affect public policy or affect what's happening at that particular level. Not only because your votes count a lot more at the local level, but a lot of these individuals at the international and national level are so arrogant and they think that they're so above you, you never have the opportunity to look them in the eye and show them that you're there, that you're paying attention, and that you will hold them accountable. So I want everybody, again, it's not necessarily about state rights, it's about individual rights. And the authority, the relationship, the power that you grant other individuals voluntarily, again, should seed out from these circles, starting with the individual, then the family, then the community. In my opinion, those three things are more important than the federal government, the United States, and the Constitution. That's my opinion. Now, the Constitution was instituted in order to protect those things that we all value, but unfortunately it's been subverted, and now it's doing just the opposite. So I want to chat with you guys about consensual government. The Declaration of Independence, of course, states that governments derive their just powers from the consent of the governed. Governments only exist in order to protect life, liberty, and property. Recall Frederick Bastiat said that it's not because of law and government that we have freedom, it's because that we were free men in the first place that we instituted government in order to protect our natural individual rights. And this is represented and enumerated in the constitutions of every single state. In Texas, Section 2 of our Bill of Rights, inherent political power, Republican form of government. All political power is inherent in the people, and all free governments are founded on their authority and instituted for their benefit. Same thing in y'all's Constitution here in New Hampshire. Society, this is Article 3 of the New Hampshire Bill of Rights, which is before, or is it at the end of the Constitution? Because I know the United States Bill of Rights is at the end, unfortunately. The Texas Bill of Rights is right up there in front. It says, when men enter into a state of society, they surrender up some of their natural rights to that society in order to ensure the protection of others, of other rights. So again, there's this repeating theme that governments are instituted in order to protect and preserve our life, liberty, and property. Well, the question then arises, what happens when governments become contrary to these very ends, as our government has, and many states' governments have as well? That's one of the things that we have is the state sovereignty in the 10th Amendment, and each one of the constitutions has the same things, the 10th Amendment from the other side. In Section 1 of the Texas Bill of Rights, freedom and sovereignty of the state. Texas is a free and independent state, subject only to the Constitution of the United States, and the maintenance of our free institutions, and the perpetuity of the Union depend on the preservation of the right of local self-government, unimpaired to all the states. Likewise, in New Hampshire, it's Article 7, state sovereignty. The people of the state have the sole and exclusive right of governing themselves as a free, sovereign, and independent state. And then it goes on. So again, what happens when not only our federal government, but in many instances the state government becomes contrary to our ends? Well, they've included that in the New Hampshire Bill of Rights. It's not in the Texas one. It is in the Declaration of Independence, and it states that whenever any form of government becomes destructive of these ends, it is the right of the people to alter or abolish it and institute new government. It goes even further in the New Hampshire Bill of Rights. If you guys haven't read this one, Article 10 is the right of revolution. Government being instituted for the It says government being instituted for the common benefit, protection, and security of the whole community, and not for the private interest or emolument of any one man, family, or class of men, bureaucrats. Therefore, whenever the ends of government are perverted and public liberty manifestly endangered and all other means of redress are ineffectual, the people may, and of right ought to, reform the old and establish a new government. And then just in case that wasn't enough, it states that the doctrine of non-resistance against arbitrary power and oppression is absurd, slavish, and destructive of the good and happiness of mankind. So that's enumerated in your founding documents. It's something that you should never forget. Government Some say government's a necessary evil, others say it's just plain evil and unnecessary. But regardless, it should be government should be consensual or it should not be at all. And when it becomes non-consensual, and whenever you try to petition your government for redress of grievances and they ignore you, then we have a little bit of a problem, ladies and gentlemen. So always go back to that consensual government, because that's what allows us to participate in a society and still remain free when it's consensual. When it's not, then it's simply a tyranny, and our individual liberties suffer as a result. So that's my little educational portion. The principle of subsidiarity, check it out. It's from the Catholic Church. It's all about localization, decentralization, and a reminder about the importance of consensual government. On to the activate portion. Educate, activate. This is a little phrase that we have. I'm also the executive director of a political action committee in Central Texas. It's called Texans for Accountable Government. And we push back on the police state. We stand up for privacy and civil liberties. We fight against the fusion centers. It's a law enforcement information and intelligence gathering apparatus. The MIAC that released the Modern Militia Movement report, labeling conservatives, Constitution Party, Libertarian Party, Ron Paul supporters, people opposed to Real ID, NAFTA Superhighway. It labeled them as potential violent radical militia threats and put that out in the minds of law enforcement. Catherine Bleish, my lovely girlfriend and soon-to-be mother of my child, she'll be speaking about fusion centers here in a second. But my point was that as Texans for Accountable Government, we came up with a little mantra that we used in all of our activism, and that is humanize, harmonize, localize. You notice I like rhyming sets of three: educate, activate, liberate, humanize, harmonize, localize. And it's just a little philosophy of activism that we take part in down in Central Texas, and it's actually been rather successful. So the humanize part just encourages people. Remember, there is value here in this tool, the computer, the internet, Facebook. Many of you are probably getting involved in that, email. But we can't really create the free society that we all yearn for from behind a computer. It's absolutely necessary that we repersonalize, because the establishment is trying to dehumanize us and break apart our human connections, our communities, our families. They're trying to destroy all of that, which is found in nature. So it's important to repersonalize, to get out in the community, to shake your neighbor's hands, meet all of your neighbors, talk to them about your philosophy, talk to them about what interests you, ask them what problems they have, work together to create a better community with them. Also, build human relationships with your local representatives and with your law enforcement. Again, the fusion center system, the Department of Homeland Security is trying to make us all out to be kooks, to be violent threats, to be radicals. And we need to show up to them, shake them in the hands firmly, look them in the eyes, and inform them that we're all peaceful people simply trying to create a better society for our posterity. So that's humanize. Remember to humanize, rehumanize, repersonalize. The next one is harmonize, and that's reach across the aisle whenever possible. We all need to recall that they're trying to create a divide and conquer situation here in the United States by pitting the left versus the right, conservatives versus liberals. That's the class conflict they're trying to create here, the political conflict. I want to remind everybody that the class structure that I subscribe to is one of the productive class, which is those people that bring value to the community, that work in a business, that own a small business, that work for wages to help a business. Those people bring value, they produce. And the other is the political and the parasitic class. Those that leech off of the federal, state, or local monopoly in order to further their own ends at the expense of others. So a lot of those people out there today, unless they belong to public unions or get paid public money, are in the same class as we are, the productive class, and they're getting harmed by the establishment, by the government, just as much as we are. So I would encourage people to unite and shake hands on common issues as much as possible. One of those that's been mentioned today is the Real ID Act. That was nullified, bipartisan support for the most part. Down in Texas, Representative David Simpson has introduced 3 bills that would nullify the TSA's involvement with the body scanners, and that's a bipartisan effort as well. So whenever possible, try to bridge the political divide so we can unite amongst our common beliefs, which in most instances is individual liberty. And if other people have been, indoctrinated to believe that individual liberty is a bad thing, then it's up to us to encourage them and show them that individual liberty will actually further what their ends are. A lot of liberals want to see a higher standard of living for the masses. I want to see that too, and I know that can only come about through free markets and a lack of government intervention. So if we can speak in terms of their ends, we're going to be more able to have success with people across the aisle. So that's harmonize. The final one is localize, and that's what this movement is all about. It's all about decentralization, and I'm all about consistency. Consistency in our means and ends. Our end is a free society. Our end is a lack of government intrusion in our lives. So if we want to bring that stuff about, our end is also decentralized authority, right? The principle of subsidiarity. So if we want to bring that about, I recommend that we all participate on the local and state level as much as possible, if not all the time. I've done my best to ignore the federal government. There's a lot of great news and stuff that goes on that's exciting to me, but I don't do any federal activism. I stopped doing it after I made the calls for the bailout, and they voted 201, some say even more than that. It was overwhelming support. That was my sign that the federal government doesn't care what I have to say, and I don't really care very much for them. So I'm going to use the state government, which is what this nullification effort is about, to deflect their intrusion into my life. And as the FBI did with their counterintelligence program, sometimes you can create conflict between the two competing governments so they can, focus on fighting each other rather than fighting we the people. Hopefully that doesn't turn into another civil war, I want to point out, however. So again, localize. Focus your energy. We all have limited time, energy, resources, money. Every dollar spent on a federal campaign is a dollar that could have been, in my opinion, or should have been spent on a local or state campaign. So humanize, harmonize, localize in order to create a more free and prosperous society. So that's the educate portion, the activate portion. The final piece, which I believe to be the most important, and I believe often gets overlooked by the liberty movement, the patriot movement, the Tea Party movement, and that's liberate. To simply choose freedom. To free ourselves from external coercion by living as free people, by living as consistent as possible with our inherent sovereign nature. And it's difficult at times because government has been instituted to kind of throw a wrench in that. Unfortunately, it's doing the exact opposite of its original purpose, and sometimes you put yourself at risk when you simply choose to live free. So there's 4 different areas that I would encourage people to liberate themselves from external control, to become self-sufficient, so to speak. The first one is liberate yourself from dependency on the value-stealing Federal Reserve note. I'm sure many of you are familiar with the Federal Reserve. They have the ability, because they have a monopoly, again, this monopoly power comes to haunt us, they have the ability to create money out of thin air, which brings the value of all of the dollars that you have in your pockets, your savings account down, right? So rather than, going to Washington again and asking them to end the Fed or audit the Fed, I think that we can end the Fed ourselves. And that's simply by stopping the use of Federal Reserve notes as much as we can and beginning to trade and barter and competing currencies. So I have here a little card, and it has a silver dime in it, pre-1964 silver dime. This quarter right here is worth over $5. It's 90% silver. So I say, to hell with end the Fed, start your own currency, and the mofo will end itself, right? So this is an effort that's based out of Freedom's Phoenix, in Phoenix, Arizona. Here's a Pork Fest card for you Free Staters. And I love this thing because it accomplishes all 3 of my foundation, the nonprofit, the Foundation for a Free Society, our 3 goals: educate, activate, and liberate. On the back of it, it's got a little thing that shows the value of the silver dime. So you can educate people by saying, hey man, this used to be worth 25 cents, now it's worth over $5. That means that your money in your pocket used to have more value, now it's worth much less. It's an educational tool. Plus it activates people, it gets them out talking with people, communicating that message of sound money, but finally it liberates us, it frees us from the monopoly control of the Federal Reserve note, which has led to not only slavery at home, but also foreign wars progression abroad. So liberate yourselves from the Federal Reserve notes, buy gold and silver, check out these cards, check out walletvoting.com, and I would encourage people to make these. Here's a Ron Paul one, 7400 right here. Yay! Make these cards on your own. You can put a Free State Project logo, you can put the local Tea Party logo, you can use this as a membership card, and then people have them in their pockets, and they're just naturally educating people wherever they go. The second part, and I believe this is probably the most important, is liberate yourself from dependency on hierarchical food production systems. Start a garden in your backyard. There's no better thing to liberate yourself than to be able to grow your own food and be self-sufficient. Start a community garden. Reach out with the local neighborhood and say, hey guys, I'm growing food. You guys need help growing food. Let's start one together. People buy plots, stuff like that. Also, this is something that's going to liberate yourselves. There's a bunch of different types of slavery, not just slavery to the government. People are often slaves to their own health. And the reason is we stuff our bodies with genetically modified food, high fructose corn syrup, it goes on and on. You can have control over your own food production and your own food supply by starting your own garden in your backyard. It'll bring the family together, it'll bring the community together. That's the second way we can liberate ourselves. The third way we can liberate ourselves, and this one, it's a little sketchy and a little risky, but it's absolutely necessary if we are to live free. And I want to mention also, these steps will assist us in reducing the size of government, because an inverse relationship exists between government power and individual liberty. And as we push back, this is all we're focusing on, bringing down government, it seems, our movement. If we start living more free, we will find that it'll be simpler to reduce government because we're no longer dependent on it for the provision of our money, for example. And the next step is liberate yourself from dependency on government for the provision of defense and justice. I'm sure many of the people in this room own firearms. Purchase firearms, buy firearms for your family and friends, train them to use firearms, take firearms instructions class, start a neighborhood watch program, open carry if you can in New Hampshire to encourage people to feel comfortable around firearms. Start a community of safety. Join the local militia if you feel it fits your fancy. This is all constitutional things, and the more dependent we become on government, the more easy it is for them to enslave us. Because, of course, that's why we have the Second Amendment. Whenever individuals don't have the right to protect themselves, the right to keep and bear arms, the government can have their way with us. So it's important. The best way to keep your family and community safe is to put a firearm in the hands of a peaceful and lawful, law-abiding citizen. And I think that's the third thing we can do.
That's right.
And finally, the fourth thing we can do to liberate ourselves from intrusive government is to practice individual nullification. To no longer participate in what you see as immoral, non-consensual, intrusive. If Obamacare, they start trying to shove it down your throats and your state hasn't nullified it yet, you don't have health insurance, which I don't, just don't buy it. Don't buy it. There's going to be enough people that will stand with you to where you can get away with disobeying that law, because as the Constitution says, it's no law at all.
That's right. That's right.
Same thing being brought up earlier, smoking marijuana, individuals disobey that law all the time and they're peaceful people. It's okay to disobey bad laws. In fact, it's encouraged. Additionally, this licensing, having to ask permission from your government to do things is simple and petty as giving someone a haircut. I hear New Hampshire starting to turn the tide. They're actually thinking about doing away with the licensing of beautician and haircuts, stuff like that. But even if they don't, I would encourage you to do it anyway. There's something called agorism, A-G-O-R-I-S-M. It encourages people to participate in non-licensed and not asking permission. Those types of services are good. So check out agorism if you haven't heard that yet. And finally, one of the biggest intrusions in our lives, the federal income tax. Do the research. It was never properly ratified back in 1911. There's no actual law that states you have to pay one. There's no liability for the individual. This is the riskiest of all, but I have confidence that there's strength in numbers, there's strength in unity, and there's strength in truth, and if we all stand up together, then there's nobody that can take us down. So those are the three things in line with decentralization and individual liberty. Educate yourselves, activate yourselves, and please don't forget to liberate yourselves, because the political solution is no solution at all, in my opinion. We all need to start living as free and sovereign beings, and we will find that we'll genuinely and just naturally create the free society that we all want to live in. So, in closing, I would encourage people to come check me out at my booth. As Michael Bolden said, the Foundation for a Free Society. We're one of the primary sponsors of this particular event. We're going to be working to put together more events. The demand for this event is very strong. It's a very telling and happy thing. Additionally, we're going to be putting together a professional, full-length documentary on the 10th Amendment, the 10th Amendment Center, and the nullification that's going across the country. And those things cost a little bit of money. So we want to encourage you guys to donate to the Foundation for a Free Society. You got the Ford Foundation, Carnegie Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, George Soros. They all funnel their money through tax-exempt foundations to promote tyranny. So here you have an opportunity with our 501c3 to give a tax-deductible donation, and you can bet your bottom dollar that we will be pushing the message of education, activation, liberation, and decentralization. So thank you very much.
Thank you, John.